has been used as a baptismal font. Edward Casey was also the man who hauled the stones for the building of Johnstown Church by Father Reid. And Mr. Casey is described by Dean Cogan as one of the most efficient cooperators whom the parish of Johnstown had in the erection of this chapel. So obviously, strong praise. Fast forward on to the 1960s, when the ruined St. Stephen's Church was earmarked by the local authority for demolition, stone by stone. This would have been a devastating end to an establishment so rich in heritage and faith for close to a millennium. Luckily and locally, Mary Claire Lynch and her sister Catherine O'Brien from Old Town and the home of the famed Black Church learned about these plans, and they objected strongly to such an extent that the plan was thankfully abandoned. Again, local intervention was at hand to save an ancient and historic site for posterity. Further local intervention of a very positive nature ensued in 1983 when the then parish priest, Father Finian O'Connor, carried out both a major renovation of Johnstown Church, a new roof, lowered ceiling, new door configuration, new Stations of the Cross, new seating, and the placement of the font in the sanctuary, amongst other improvements. And I can safely say it cost more than 500 sterling. And he initiated a major clean-up and renovation of the cemetery, church, entranceway and driveway by parishioners of all ages, because the site at this stage, St. Stephen's Church and the cemetery itself, and even the entranceway, was quite overgrown. And it ended up that this clean-up left the site, the whole site, in the condition that it deserved. It had been strangled in a jungle of extensive foliage and uncontrolled vegetation up to then. In the clean-up process, vegetation was cleared, gravestones were straightened, and many more were rediscovered for them to see the light of day for the first time in centuries. Father Michael Cahill has continued the good work in redecorating Johnstown Church in recent years. The church was then rededicated on October the 2nd, 1983, and historically, after this initial major clean-up of the cemetery by a wonderful group of volunteers, Father O'Connor celebrated Mass in the grounds of St. Stephen's Church on September the 9th, 1984, which was a significant milestone in both religious and historic terms for the Holy Ground. Further good news for the venerable site followed when there was a further clean-up in 1992 in preparation for the 800th anniversary of the establishment of St. Stephen's Church by Geoffrey de Filippo, on a day when Mass was celebrated by the parish priest, then Father Nicholas Donegan, assisted by a clerical son of Johnstown Parish, Father Patrick Steen, who was attached to the nearby St. Columban Mission in the Philippines. And in the following year, on September the 26th, Dr. Michael Smith, then Bishop of Meath, celebrated a concelebrated Mass and consecrated the new addition to the cemetery, which had been generously donated by Pat and Helen Carolan, owners of the adjacent Kilcarn Park House and Farm, as extra land to the parish for new graves. And there is absolutely no doubt that the increase in the parish population and consequent burials will necessitate a further extension in the near future if the cemetery continues in use in its present location. In 2003, 2 headstones were erected, one to remember those children who died before their baptism and who had been interred outside the main portion of the cemetery, and the other to remember all those who were buried in the cemetery over centuries, but who sadly had no headstones to remember them, because they may have been just wooden crosses or metal crosses which decayed or were removed. Thus, everyone who lay in or around the cemetery have now been commemorated and respected forever in the dignified manner that they deserve. A fine crucifix was installed in 2004, and the very useful addition of piped water was added in 2006, which took away the cumbersome toil of throwing water to keep fresh the new flower bed, grave flowers, shrubs, and the newly planted trees in the cemetery. Finally, we remember the most important section of any cemetery, the people who are buried there, and whom you remember now. In 2006, antiquarians Noel French and Michael O'Brien published a detailed and comprehensive list of all the legible headstones, 119 in total, in the cemetery and within the church itself, including inscriptions and memorials, and this is available electronically. Very importantly, lists of burial registers since 1920 of people known to be buried in Kilcarn Cemetery, but with probable or no headstones, have been recorded for the benefit of parishioners, even if the site of their graves is not necessarily known. The end of August each year is the time for the blessing of the graves in Kilcarn, in Monktown, near Walterstown Church, and in Temple Kieran on the Screen Road. Recently, a line of evergreen trees were removed to let in welcome light to the western side of the cemetery and church, which had previously been very much in deep shade. As well as allowing more natural light, the removal has afforded wonderful views across Kilcarn Park towards the Boyne and Navan, and far beyond for locals and visitors to the cemetery, upon which to reflect and ponder in quiet meditation. The earliest known graves start at the very beginning of the 18th century. Joan Bryan, B-R-Y-A-N, buried in 1709, is the oldest legible stone on record, but there may be much older stones, and there are much older stones. And as well as 20th century and more recent burials, there are many graves, memorials and inscriptions from the 18th and 19th centuries as well. Very many people were involved in recent times in renovating, maintaining and improving the church and cemetery, all too numerous to mention, but I do not think anyone would criticise me for singling out three parishioners, the late Bernie and Mary Carrick and the great Michael O'Brien, mentioned earlier on several occasions, for special mention, as for so many years they kept the flag flying for St Stephen with dedication, hard work and devoted service to the parish on behalf of parishioners, clergy and the public. We owe them a lot and we thank them for their dedication. The proud history of St Stephen's Church has traversed a Norman settlement via Henry II, with his medieval era of administration. It has survived the perils of King Henry VIII and his dissolution, the 1641 insurrection, Oliver Cromwell's army of destruction, the penal laws, stone-throwing youths, statutory demolition, plans, and years of sustained and biodiverse foliar growth. Well-established ivy is now the greatest threat to the survival of existing walls, but that can be carefully removed. It has gained continued life from Norman knights, Cistercian monks, Bishop de Rochford, subsequent ministering clergy, the Welsh family, Reverend Philip Barry, the Casey family, Mary Claire Lynch and Catherine O'Brien, and most recently, the people and clergy of the Union of Parishes of Johnstown and Walterstown, and of course of the Diocese of Meath. Plans and funds for further works of restoration and preservation by the local authority are promised. Finally, a visitor to the graveyard once recalled meeting a skull. We may not necessarily believe him. The skull allegedly addressed him with the following words, but it is probably more likely that the visitor saw and read the words inscribed on one of the oldest graves here in this precious and hallowed ground. So I will include this address by remembering these words. Remember, man, as you pass by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, you all will be. Remember, man, and pray for me. Thank you.
I think you nearly said to better record. Chris, fantastic.
Okay.
As I said, absolutely. And we were just reflecting, Hannesman and I said back there, when something looks so simple and well delivered and everything else, you think, oh, anyone can do that. Not really, because the amount of work and time and effort that's gone into every word on that sheet and the rewrites and the will I do it, it's amazing. And that's what we are thanking you for, because that's the work that you were giving after giving us tonight. It's absolutely enjoyable. And a few things.
Public servants have time to do these things.
I wouldn't know. A few things that I was thinking about.
Yeah.
graveyard is 800 years old.
832, yeah.
Okay. If 30 people were buried in it
Yeah.
every year, there's 24,000 people.
There's a lot of people there.
That's a lot of people.
I'd say there was more, I mean, during famine times.
Absolutely. But I'm just being concerned
Yeah.
because
Well-
I always thought somebody's going to say, well, it's 25. But
No,
no,
there were 11
it's just
the parish priest in Johnstown during the famine buried 11 people a day.
and that's the kind of history, and that's the. Well, I reflected on that the night we were out there.
Yeah,
When we visit these civils graveyards,
yes.
how important is and how hallowed the ground is that we
Yes.
stand on. And just because we see stones with names on them
Yeah,
doesn't reflect the people that are buried there. And it's incredible. When we look today, we went through 800 years very quickly in 1 hour. But when you reflect upon the upheaval, the misery, the hardship, the terror, you know, and today you turn on the news,
and it's the same.
and it's the same. It may not be in Ireland, and it may not, and we somehow acknowledge Hugh de Lacy,
Yeah,
and we wonder, and then we on the other hand say, Putin, what are you doing?
I know.
You know, so it's incredible how history, you know, so we have to reflect in our own minds that what's happening today is just
Yeah,
a continuation of history that will go on
nothing new
forever
on
and
it.
ever.
So.
Has anybody any questions? I bet you there are. Yes?
Yeah, congratulations
Thank you.
on the presentation. You said you built 2 mud cabin chapels
Yeah,
after the Reformation.
yeah. One. They weren't very robust.
Did you ever hear that there were regulations after the...
I didn't.
Well, one of the regulations was that you could not build a church with stone.
You couldn't build it with stone.
No, and it had to be off the main road. That's why you see so many in them up lanes.
Right. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
that's
The
right.
one,
Yeah.
you're right, Timmy. The one in Black Line, just beside Kenson, was mud walled as well. And that was the
And
main
Dana's
one.
turn.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's down
right.
from Dana's
Yeah.
turn, yeah.
And there had to be,
One
I had to be
interesting thing
thatched.
about- Sorry.
It had to be thatched. No
Right.
tin or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was that